This week on Great Chat, we talk about the AI wars and the benefits of being a challenger brand versus the de facto market leader. I'm Angela, and today I'm joined by Helen and Ashley. As always, Great Chat is brought to you by Mercury, the fintech used by entrepreneurs through every stage of company building. We use Mercury to run this podcast and love recommending it to other founders and fund managers. Try it for yourself. Visit Mercury.com to join over 200,000 entrepreneurs who use Mercury to make managing their money unbelievably simple.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Welcome back, Angela, to both the pod and
the world. I've been living in a cave, like blocked by a gigantic rock. I have no idea what's been happening in the outside world, so I feel like I'm just
learn about that later on.
I love when Angela disappears. I'm like, big things are cooking. It's not a little pre-seed deal. Something's happening. So
well, we were trying to give her a rundown on what she missed in the world, and I feel like the big headline is Costco is selling GLP-1s at 50% off. Apparently, they've got some partnership with two of the drug companies. So yeah, it's Ozempic and Wegovy. I think now like 50% off. And so
maybe GLP-1s are Costco's new rotisserie chicken. Like they're willing to sell it at a loss just to keep the people.
But then there were all those like investigative deep dives on how the rotisserie chicken is like not a good thing to buy there.
No, wait, sorry, you're blowing my mind. Like, wait, I like can't even, wait, hold too many. Okay, first of all, this is like life-changing because I was in Europe and GLP-1s are much cheaper in Europe. So I was literally trying to set up like a human trafficking operation for myself to purchase like 3 months worth of GLP-1s in London to take back with me. But now I can go to Costco and not human traffic GLP-1s. So that's exciting.
Angela, it's like a perfect pair with eggs because you need to eat a lot of protein if you're taking GLP-1s. And so you can get like the discount GLP-1s and like the dozen crates of eggs that your family buys monthly.
I want to see that like Costco shopping cart, you know, because they have like a very particular look to them of somebody there's just like all eggs on one side and then just like the stacks of
GLP-1s. Yeah. It should be Serena pushing the cart. That could be their.
So true. Yeah. Oh yeah, muscle deterioration is like a number one sort of like side effect, right? Or something.
Although I think they're working on like future versions that help mitigate that. So stay tuned.
Our neighborhood Costco is not going to know what hit them because we're going to up our consumption of eggs and they like will literally just buy out the entire supply of Costco eggs. But wait, Helen, like backtrack, like rotisserie chickens from Costco, like what, like this is like a staple of our household.
Sorry,
like don't crush my dream.
Yeah, investigative reporting on Great Chat.
Try talking about it. Just yeah. It's something to do with like the chickens not being like humanely whatever.
Oh, I thought it was, so there's this amazing book on like grocery stores and like how to shop them well. It tells you like what not to buy. I'll try to find the name of the book and share it in the group chat. But like there's a whole sort of sequencing of like what to do with food when it doesn't sell, right? So you have like the chickens for sale, just like, you know, ready to go so you can take them home and cook them. If they can't sell you the chicken, they like put it in the rotisserie. And so like the rotisserie chickens have already been like hanging out for a while. And then even worse is never buy the chicken salad because the chicken salad is what they do if no one buys the rotisserie chickens.
Well, they're derivatives, right? It's like they're just the derivative of the derivative.
But it's like you're eating a chicken from like the 1900s by the time it's in a salad. And I used to like I don't like a lot of prepared foods, but like if I have to eat prepared foods, like I like curried chicken salad. And now I'm like, no more. I know too much. Gosh. Anyways.
See, classic. I knew that my aversion to mayonnaise and mayonnaise products would save me one day. And this is kind of how I avoid the chicken salad.
This is the hard-hitting news that like we need, which is GLP-1s on discount and beware of the rotisserie chickens. Like this, it could save your life, both.
So the other thing, did you guys make any fun videos on Sora last week?
I tried to make 2. And both of them were like not allowed. I didn't want to do anything with my own face likeness cameo, but I came up with some clever endings to movies that I thought would be funny, and both of them violated whatever sort of like copyright guardrails they have. So,
But did you do it on the first day or like a couple days later? Because I think that they were
as soon as
okay.
Sally was my hookup for
yes,
the invite.
Yes.
This was before they like came down harder, so I hit their most meager level of guardrails, and now they have much higher ones. But I will say, like, my husband's super into it, which is funny, and a lot of my friends are into it. I just like, guys, I am immune to whatever gets people excited about seeing their own face in like cartoons and videos. Like, it does nothing for me. So but I have lots of thoughts on the launch. But first, Helen, I want to hear, did you?
Oh, that's so interesting. It's like, what was that, dating myself, but do you remember the holiday card where you and your 4 coworkers become like the elf and you like send it to other people?
No.
Elf yourself. Oh
my gosh.
Jesus,
wow.
I live in a different world. Okay, well, anyways, yes, actually I had that. I'm going to send the link. But I had that thought when I was doing it. It felt very like elf yourself.
You were elfing
which is a
yourself?
very like 2005.
Go elf yourself.
2005 thing. So that's a good callback. But the first video I made did not have copyright violations because I was like, oh, I can put myself in any situation. And I made myself a Olympic gold medalist in the 92 Winter Olympic Games for figure skating.
Cool.
Oh.
Figure skating. It was amazing.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Now you don't have to actually learn to skate.
No, I was a figure skater for like 10 years. So this was a very...
I actually did not know that.
I grew up in Buffalo, not a lot to do.
I knew about your like dancing backgrounds, but that makes sense.
Skating. It's in the family, exactly. But no, that video lives on, and so yeah, that was what I created. Angela, did you create anything?
No, I mean, this is like somewhat embarrassing to say, but so many people were emailing me for Sora invites, and I was like, I don't even know how I get myself a Sora invite. So
Sally.
Yes, Sally.
Yeah, Sally's patient zero in our group chat. So hit her up. So the thing I liked the most about the Sora launch, or Sora 2 as it is, was Sam Altman's decision to make his cameo, so his likeness, like available to all. I thought that was
genius.
Absolutely brilliant. Because it instantly normalized the behavior. Like he's modeling the behavior, he wants people to have on the platform. It also meant that the first time we saw, like a public figure doing something really goofy or even offensive, it was Sam Altman. And so it just sort of like normalized and like defanged, like, oh, like here's Sam Altman like doing a crazy dance or saying a crazy thing. And it was so smart. It just meant he was everywhere, and that Sora 2 videos were instantly recognizable versus like meta vibes.
Totally. That reminds me of a topic you like, which is it made me think of how Zuck always blurs out his kids' faces when he shares photos of his family, right? What a contrast. I mean, one is kids, but the broader point is, right, he is modeling behavior, right, in a way that is quite contrary to the way that I think that he would want users to use the product, which is different than what you're saying Sam's doing. So yeah, I thought of that as well.
I also thought about it, actually, I think it was, I tweeted about this, and then someone, I wish I could give them credit, but I don't remember who it was off the top of my head, replied and also said, like, what an interesting contrast with Zuck, because right now Zuck's trying to be cool. He's got his like gold chain. He's very like packaged right now in this like sort of new Zuck mode. And here is Sam just leaning into like awkwardness and hilarity and like being memed, and what an interesting contrast between like trying to have a lot of control over your public image and just being like, hey guys, do whatever the fuck you want with me. So I thought that was really fun. And like, there's sort of a little bit of feels like Zuck and Sam rivalry brewing. And so fun to see the lanes they're both picking, even just for their like, personas.
Totally. So yesterday was DevDay, right? Third annual DevDay, but definitely the one that got, I think, the most coverage to date. And there was a lot of chatter about the announcements, and I think we anticipated that they were going to do something, make a big announcement on agents. It does sound like ChatGPT becoming the everything app is quite a possibility. But what I thought was really interesting were all the tweets that were like commenting on the authenticity of sort of Sam and Greg and Johnny Ive like on stage, and how this felt so different than they compared it to like a really polished pre-recorded Apple keynote. And I think there was one tweet, and it was like, I'd rather see like 100 Zuck fumbles than like a perfectly polished pre-recorded Apple keynote. I think they're referencing like the Meta glasses that launched, and there was like a little glitch, but it felt so real and authentic. And I was on Instagram and I saw Daniel Lurie, the San Francisco mayor, doing like an interview with Sam and Greg outside, and it was just so like he just handed someone a phone, his phone, to have them film them, and it was like I just cannot imagine any time in the past like that dynamic happening, right? Like, so if you were frozen for the last 15 years and they showed you this, you'd be like, what? Like, this is the mayor, this is like, the CEO and CTO of like or I don't know what Greg Brockman does anymore, but
attend the Met Gala.
yes. But like the most significant, I guess, private technology company in the world, and they're just hanging out. There's nothing really formal. There's nothing produced about it, and I think that that's really the moment that we're living in. So I thought that was really interesting from DevDay yesterday.
I love it. It felt like it borrowed, and maybe this is just me projecting too much because of Sam's prior role, but it felt very like Y Combinator demo day, where it's not just about like it's about the full community, and like it's a group event, and I think this was very much like a platform-oriented announcement, right? Like developer-focused announcement. And so I think the spirit of it was right, which was that it was about the community and not just about like a few OpenAI execs like showing off some really flashy stuff. It's funny, I very much remember the like Apple keynote being the gold standard, right? Like when we started doing events at Box, which was an enterprise software company, couldn't have been further from Apple, but that level of polish was the desire, right? And of course, Helen, as you were pointing out in the group chat the other day, like those were very much oriented around media too, as sort of the main audience for those events, or maybe at least like media as the intermediary to then go and tell the world and bring other people in. And so everything is much more controlled. Everything was much more orchestrated, multiple embargoes lifting at different times. And
yeah, so tons of gatekeeping, right? Lots of gatekeeping and like little contracts. Not actual contracts, but like little social contracts among the reporters who are covering it. But this is like, I think they had 2,000 people in attendance, which is not a lot, right? But every one of those 2,000 people has a smartphone and a Twitter account or LinkedIn or whatever. And they know that these are, 2,000 curated reporters.
Influential people.
Yeah, influential people that...
Yeah.
So it's just a completely different time, and I think that they're definitely meeting the moment, and they're doing it at a scale and in a way that I think that the Apple and Meta and like others just like aren't doing. So
I also think there's just so much more tolerance for things being raw right now because things are moving so quickly, right? Like we're in the early phases of AI. OpenAI is moving at a crazy pace with, the fact that they launched Sora 2 last week. And then this week they're talking about ChatGPT becoming like the new operating system for the internet. Like this is a company that's moving on a lot of fronts. And so like we're not looking for polish. Like it's all about speed and progress and experimenting, and even some of their answers around they talked about hardware, but they didn't really have much to say. But that's okay. All of this is permissible because we know we're like on a new frontier and it's moving very quickly. And so it's just like also fun to think about the broader context that makes this approach possible.
Well, it feels like TikTok has finally made its way to the enterprise. Enterprise always lags consumer, and I think consumers have gravitated from like the polished Instagram
Yeah.
form to like the authentic and real TikTok, and now companies are progressing, which means that we'll have to find the next thing that consumers are onto. So I don't know what that is, but I have to say it's interesting. I was in Europe all of last week, and I, on the recommendation of a friend, had breakfast at the Wolseley, which is this like institution in London, and I was sitting down in these like leather booth with my physical copy of the newspaper, The Times, and I think I went through the entire newspaper and did not see a single headline on like a tech company or AI. I mean, there was an article about how, you know, Prince William, Princess Kate don't let their children have phones for screen time. You know, there was an article about what's happening in politics, but literally nothing about OpenAI, nothing about Google, nothing about Anthropic. I literally felt like I was living in an alternate universe where AI didn't exist.
That sounds
That like
nice.
a 1 week vacation from AI. Meanwhile, New York was like losing its mind over the Anthropic coffee pop-up, which Helen, I think you saw.
Oh, totally. I saw it on both Friday and Saturday, which is so funny. I just happened to be staying near there. So on Friday, I walked by, there was a line, and it's like, there's lots of stuff that has lines in New York, you know, so it wasn't really obvious what it was. And it was a beautiful day. And then I got on Twitter, and it's like, because I had just seen it in person, the Twitter photos actually, this is going to sound weird, it made it look better. Like they had like this beautiful filter and like this like kind of amber sheen on it that, like, you know, everyone talks about aura these days. Like it had good aura, like, you know, and like
not to be confused with Aura the ring.
The Aura ring, yes. And I was sort of like, oh, okay, cool. They're doing a pop-up. They're giving away hats, and it's a coffee shop. And I think, you know, the story is the next day I saw that they ran out of hats, and they said that they would have more hats at 9 a.m. the next day. So the next day I walked by again, and this time I knew what it was, and like the line was truly like wrapped around like multiple buildings. It was absurd. And I think my comment on this, there's been so much commentary, there's like PhD dissertation level, you know, write-ups about like the analysis of you know, how good this was. And I'll just say, like, for me, it was the classic like anti-positioning, you know, what we just talked about with OpenAI and like speed and power and sort of like dominance. And it's like, and you know, Anthropic, I think, continually chooses to be, and maybe I'm giving them more credit, you know, than necessary, but it's just like, it seems like they're choosing to they're being intentional about, you know, being thoughtful in what they put out in the world and not competing like, oh, we're just as fast or we're just as powerful. It's like, oh, we're doing this other thing, something that we do uniquely well and better than anyone else. And the thing that I thought was so interesting was, like, you know, they're obviously positioning themselves as anti-slop with like the thinking and the feeling and all of that, but also like all the things around this pop-up experience were so unscalable, right? Like, think about it, like a line, literally can't make the line go faster. Hats that run out, coffee that's made by baristas, like they're people, they can't go faster. And I just felt like, oh, what a cool sort of like, I don't know, human grounding in the positioning. And I thought that that's something that somebody commented in our thread that like OpenAI just launched a campaign talking about humanity, right? But that like Anthropic kind of did like a show not tell on this one. So I thought that was nice.
I didn't think about this at the time, but the fact that it's like San Francisco Tech Week and DevDay, like the reason they did this in New York was probably like that geographical distance also probably enabled them to create like a very different space and feel. While meanwhile in San Francisco, OpenAI DevDay, like very different vibe.
I can't verify this at all, but I actually had a thought that like, I don't even know how intentional it was. Like, it's possible that this pop-up was just very experimental and just like, let's try this thing. And it blew up. And it
might have been like booked 6 months ago, but we get to interpret it in the context of the moment.
Totally.
Sure.
So like,
For sure.
Yeah, I think that also speaks to just like, you can just do things, right? Authenticity. try stuff. Like, it doesn't need to be overly choreographed and like just perfect.
Know who you are and try to pull that through into every experience. It's funny because the other big AI like moment in New York recently was the friend.com plastering of the subway with, I don't know if you guys have seen the like pictures of those ads. It's like a photo of their pendant and then like a definition of friend that's like someone who is there for you and listens and supports you or something. And people hated it. Like, really, like, people are like marking up the post, which, you know, in some ways is a sign of a successful campaign. It's got people talking, whatever. But like the response to the Anthropic like coffee pop-up was so unanimously positive. And so it's just like fun to see that contrast. I actually feel like this is a perfect transition to maybe like the bigger topic that we wanted to get into, which was like challenger brand status, right? And obviously like we're in this weird AI moment where everyone has crazy resources and all the players are growing really quickly. And so maybe it's not like the classic dynamic where there's one company that has a ton of market share and one company that's like, you know, like much smaller and going after, like we're things are moving quickly, and the sort of like resources people have to put to work are immense. But we're definitely seeing like a challenger brand dynamic play out with Anthropic vis-a-vis OpenAI, and so I think that might be like a fun thing to unpack a little bit. Like, what does choosing the challenger position imply in terms of what are your advantages? What does it make it harder to do? How do we see Anthropic doing this? And like, how is this playing out in tech more broadly?
I think it's an interesting framing because we also typically think of challenger brands as the small David going against the well-established Goliath. But OpenAI and Anthropic, I mean, they were all one team and then they split up. So it wasn't like OpenAI was already Goliath. It's just interesting positioning of what we even mean when we say challenger brand and how the dynamics are maybe different when both are coming up versus one has been around for decades. And I think that's more of the typical framing.
Although it is interesting because like it is in Anthropic's DNA to challenge OpenAI, right? That's why those employees left and broke off, was to provide an alternative to like the AI future OpenAI was building towards. And so there are many things about this that are not classic. Like we can talk through maybe some of like the most classic examples of like challenger brands. But like Anthropic very much exists in opposition and in response to OpenAI, whereas like OpenAI is not even talking about Anthropic, right? It's just like doing its own thing, which is another sort of classic dynamic of like the Goliath, you know, sort of like pushing forward and maybe setting the tone for the market, and then the challenger, big part of their brand is like picking out what that player is doing. And that doesn't happen in the reverse.
Right. Those are like the classic rules of brands, right? The number one person never acknowledges competition, or number two, whereas you see Coca-Cola in a Pepsi commercial, but you never see the reverse. Yeah, I think, you know, the other thing right now with AI companies, they're so well-funded that it's really hard to paint any one of them in this sort of traditional, you know, David sort of character, which is interesting. And, you know, I'll say that, and I was telling you guys a story about Zuck when Google launched Google Plus, and we were all, you know, nervous about, you know, what a success that would be. I think that it's a really powerful thing to identify as the challenger, even if you are not, if that makes sense. There's a much more, I think, inspiring, motivating, rallying cry to say that all the odds are against you, right? Like that you are the underdog. And I think that great leaders are able to sort of evoke that spirit, regardless of how successful they become or the company becomes. And so what I find interesting is, you know, I think we're making this assumption that like, oh, well, Anthropic is the challenger, and internally they must be like, ooh, we are the underdog, and, you know, we must fight and be more creative and find ways to fight against OpenAI. But it's like, we don't know the conversations happening inside OpenAI. They absolutely must see themselves as the underdog against Meta and Google and Microsoft and all of these incumbents, right? So I think that psychology is pretty interesting.
To your point about like being a challenger, being such a good rallying cry, when you think about the most galvanizing moment in OpenAI's like relatively short history, it's when Sam Altman was ousted, right? They were under duress. They were being challenged, and the employees came together, the tech ecosystem came together, and like that was such a powerful moment when they were like most under threat. And I think Sam played that really well. It became now now that we are have restabilized the company, let's go do this. And so I think you're right. Like Steve Jobs is another example of a leader. For as long as he was leading Apple was a challenger. Even as it became the market leader in categories, it literally created the spirit of challenger brand and his own story of building the company and then being ousted for a much longer period. Like Sam Altman was a couple of days, coming back and having that comeback. And people love to root for a challenger. They love to root for a comeback. And so it's interesting to see that being manufactured on shorter timelines.
I was thinking about this exact point actually in relation to Perplexity recently, and I thought it was such a smart move for them to take on Google and search as sort of their flag in the world, because they were this tiny startup that no one knew about, but because they were challenging Google, every article they were mentioned against Google and these much larger companies, and the earned media and the attention they got from positioning themselves as a challenger in this way was great. They got so much more press and attention than other companies going after smaller, more niche spaces. And so it's an interesting concept, Ashley, to your point, that people like to root for the challenger. And if you position yourself that way, it doesn't matter if you are successful yet, people want to talk about you, people want to set up the dynamic, and they're helping you on that arc.
Yeah, 100%. Angela, I'm so glad you brought that up, because this is one of the things that drives me crazy sometimes about how startups tell their stories, is a lot of people like to pretend that no competition exists, right? They talk about their space, their challenges, as if they are the only player. And I feel one of the biggest things you have going for yourself as a startup is you are inherently a challenger, and you are going after some sort of Goliath, whether it's a literal Google, or even if it's something a little bit more abstract. And leaning into that drama is something that inspires people emotionally to want. It taps in our desire to root for the David, root for the underdog. And I think Perplexity is a beautiful example of doing that. They went after Google and search very early on, before they really had a right to, right? From from a traction perspective. And to your point, it really benefited them from an earned media perspective too, because when you think about the universe of reporters who are interested in covering early startups, it's very small, especially these days, as most journalists are pulled into covering these multi-billion-dollar funding rounds and all of these big moves of the largest players. But the biggest companies all have beat reporters, and part of their mandate is to cover any challengers to the companies that they cover. And so if you do an effective job of positioning yourself as that challenger, you can get on the radar of, all of these much bigger publications and beat reporters than you would if you're just oh, hey, we're a startup that's, gonna change the way you search the internet, and not making any mention of oh no, we're going after Google and we're taking their market share.
Totally. I think that in this example, it was a little bit, I don't know, I really struggle with the AI companies that have just raised so much money to be you know what I mean? It's we know that that's the story. That's how you raised the money. That they have this big ambition.
Well, the money reinforces the story for sure, right?
Exactly. So it's you're really squeezing the sympathy from reporters and people sort of looking at with the David and Goliath framing. But
it's hard to be a true David these days. You have more than stones to throw, for sure.
That's right. I mean, one thing I thought of was like, I think a lot of emerging managers do a good job of the David and Goliath story, or like small funds, like smaller funds against the mega funds or the tier ones in this environment. But then like, you eventually graduate. And I think that is a very interesting transition, and one that takes a lot of self-awareness and pivots and changes as well. Like, so like the first job I had out of college, like one of the first jobs, like I worked for Audi of America. And at the time, they were definitely behind Mercedes-Benz and BMW with regard to like the German automakers in the US. And, over time, like they did really move up their position in the market, and they had to like dramatically shift the way that they position themselves. And I think that there are fewer playbooks on how to do that, if that makes sense, especially in the tech world, right? But I mean, I was just thinking this morning, like AMD having a moment. And for most of my adult life, like Intel was just so dominant. And so like, what's the playbook on this?
Or even for me, I think the company of the moment is Oracle. Like if you're talking about a challenger brand, right? People kind of left them for
Larry
dead.
Ellison is
Cisco.
David.
Like
Cisco. It's
Cisco. But no,
we love you, Cisco.
I have to find this clip. It's one of my favorite Larry Ellison interviews where the reporter is asking him, like, how do you feel? Like, it seems like you're kind of left behind in this cloud evolution. And he just looks at him point blank, is like, I don't agree with that. Like, I invented the cloud. And it's just like one of those classic moments. But you look at the course that they've been on. I mean, they provide cloud for ByteDance. They're potentially investing in TikTok, the partnership they've struck with OpenAI. Like, they're really going all in on cloud. And it's interesting to see this, well-established, decades-old company really try to reinvent itself as a challenger in this AI infrastructure space. And I was listening to some interviews about Larry, and I think the common theme is he is a super competitive person, and similar to what you were saying, Helen, around Zuck and how he views Facebook or Meta as the underdog. Larry always has to have an enemy, right? It's not enough to like be successful. Like there's always someone that he has to take down, and that's the only way that he knows how to operate. So inherently, like he's always looking to be that challenger to someone that he's taking down. And that's what's enabled him now that he's like, 80. If I were a billionaire in 80, I'd probably be like retired on the beach drinking a margarita, which is probably why I'm not an 80-year-old billionaire. But he's, putting it all on the line and going all in and taking this huge gamble on the AI space. So I think that to me is just the most interesting challenger story of the past few months.
Helen, to your point around like what happens when you are so successful as a challenger brand that you can't sort of claim that position anymore, I'm having a hard time thinking of beyond maybe Apple, but I would say Apple is no longer a challenger brand. Who knows if Steve Jobs were still alive today, if that would feel different. But outside of tech, I feel like Nike has preserved its challenger status. And obviously it was very much a challenger brand, especially if you've read like Shoe Dog, one of my like absolute favorite books about entrepreneurship and just memoirs in general. Adidas was like very much like the market, the dominant market player when Nike was coming up. And so Nike's whole ethos was like a challenger was like so in its DNA. And of course now I believe Nike is like much bigger than Adidas from a market share and like a brand like a mind share perspective. And I think what they've done such a beautiful job of doing, and we'll see if Anthropic can do this. Okay, I'm going to bring it back to AI, is like they've transferred the challenger energy to their customer, right? Like so much of Nike's advertising and positioning is about like the individual, like just doing it. Yes, they sponsor some of the best athletes in the world, but a lot of their advertising is around like the average person just like pushing themselves. And maybe Anthropic is going to stand for humans and like humans being like the challenger. Like, can we maintain our humanity and our relevance in this age of AI and maybe eventually super intelligence? And that's like that's the challenger piece of their brand and the the thinking and the like keeping humans at the center of things. So maybe Anthropic has a shot at pulling off a Nike where, it's Anthropic's growth is insane, right? I think its actual like trajectory is like faster than OpenAI, even though it's still like smaller overall. But like, standing for humans in this era is a bit of a like challenger position. And so maybe that's their move and where they're, placing their bets.
I would say something different. I would say Anthropic, their revenue is so driven by enterprise and developer that I would say that they are almost unburdened by like needing to have this mass consumer affinity and adoption. And I would run with that if I were them, right? It's like, oh, well, yes, I mean, thoughtful thinking people like to use Anthropic, and those people are the builders inside companies and, on developer teams. And I think that's just, it's such a smaller, in a more attainable position where you can have like higher concentration of that messaging. It is so hard to be building an everything app and trying to serve I think, yes, unanimously, everybody loved the Anthropic pop-up. Everybody loved all the announcements from Demo Days, but I'm now like searching for contrarian thoughts on Twitter. Very hard to find these days. And I felt like the best one that I've heard from yesterday, and a couple of smart people, were also saying this, privately, is just sort of, how can OpenAI maintain so many, sort of like facets of the company right now? They are a young company. They're still private, right? And every week, last week it was Sora 2, and this week it's all the announcements from DevDay, and it's like, how many people work there? Like, not that many people. A lot, but not a Meta, not a Google, right? And so I think that the valid criticism or sort of questions that I heard were sort of like, it feels very thin. Like, how deep could this be, and like, how stable will it be? And I think that if you're an incumbent and you're feeling unsexy and not part of the moment, I would double, triple down on like the stability, right? So if I'm Google or Microsoft or whatever, it's like, you've got shareholders, you've got all of these extra compliance, and sort of like safety hurdles that you have to cross because you are a public company with, a storied brand and all of these things. Because you have, like, the anti-positioning is sometimes a bigger opportunity than the initial shot. And I think that was, to me, the takeaway from Anthropic. And I actually think that a lot of the incumbents who feel like they're missing the moment, I would take stock of what you have, and not try to copy them. Like, the authentic thing for these incumbents to do is to look at who they are and not try to copy OpenAI.
Yeah, Anthropic has the benefit of its actual business is much more concentrated than OpenAI, which, to your point, is operating on a lot of different fronts. I do think Anthropic's brand aspirations go far beyond like the sort of it's sort of like ICP right now. From what I hear from people who work there, they see themselves in like a true battle with OpenAI for like the future of humanity. And so let's see where this goes. It's actually really funny. Maybe this is like a bad thing to admit about myself. I use ChatGPT, but I'm rooting for Anthropic. And just like I use Uber, but I like for a while was like, I hope Lyft wins. So there's also the like, what brand do you like versus the reality of what products you use. And so brand only takes you so far. Well, fun. Maybe let's like hit a listener question. This one actually came from a friend via text, but I figured I would give her the benefit of more brains. I won't share too many details about her, but she's like a super impressive operator, has worked at some of the best brands in tech, from consumer, enterprise, crypto, fintech. And she's interviewing for senior level positions, exec level positions at a number of startups right now, and is so turned off by how these founders are like, well, are you ready to work 996? Like, I'm gonna need 200%. And so her question is this just the new normal? Like, do you accept this? She thinks it like sets the wrong tone for like how work will be judged. And I'm curious, like, is this just every job right now? Is this a red flag? Like, what would you think?
She should move to Europe, not to keep coming back to this point, but I literally was in a room with like 20 people and they were asking me what the mood in Silicon Valley is. And I was saying, the term, at least then, I'm sure we've moved on, is being like locked in, everyone's locked in and everyone's working 996. And I kid you not, like this group of like 15 people were like, what is 996? And so, it's like, it started in China, like it's, it's made its way to the work culture here and it has yet to arrive on the continent. So, she should look for a European company is my suggestion.
I mean, there are some legit European startups in the AI race too. So maybe the answer is go work at Lovable versus OpenAI and have your cake and eat it too.
I'm going to make a weird comment, but it's one that came up like yesterday in conversation. To me, 996 is like DEI right now. It's like everyone feels this, okay, it's a thing. And then you feel this pressure and you're like, even if you've got questions about it, there is no nuance and you don't want to seem like you're not charging ahead at 1,000%. So you have to do it and you have to put it on your job postings and you have to incorporate it into your interviews. And I think that there can be, good intentions, right? Like who doesn't want to say that they've got a company that has strong work ethic and that people are, driven by the mission and, very like committed and excited about the work that they do, all of those things, right? But it's like, I think that we have put a label on it and it's now kind of crossed this line of it being like more performative and just all nuance being lost. So I would tell your very smart friend who has great experience that like, I think that the best thing that she could do is to just take a step back and look at this in a much more long-term way and what this, might remind her of in the past. And yeah, in the short term, it might mean that she needs to grind it out like for 6 months or however, but my prediction, and I could be wrong, but this is just my prediction, is that there will be some backlash to it, right? Like there will be some honest conversation about like how this is bad for society and families and frankly like maybe the performance of companies in the end, and things will kind of swing back to normal, or there will be a company that positions themselves as the anti-996 and they will be wildly successful and then everyone will want to me too, we're just like that as well. So I would just say we're in this 996 moment, like you're in a DEI moment and you accept it and then that like all moments they pass. That is kind of how I would think.
I love it. I think it was the founder of Clay who at Primary Summit said on stage, when I hear you talking about 996, what you're really telling me is you don't have a moat. And I thought that was like such a good little quip.
That's that's a good candidate for how 996 dies. Seriously, like I think that you need examples. You need examples of very successful companies that are not so performative around that. I mean, I think that it's going to be impossible to be a successful company without hard work. So I'm not saying that, some wildly opposite example, but it's like somebody who isn't sort of parroting those talking points.
Shout out to Christina Cordova, the COO of Linear. She had a really thoughtful response on LinkedIn to 996 that was like, oh, this makes me want to go work at Linear, right? Because it wasn't like, oh, we don't work hard or we're not worried, but it was like, to your point, Helen, much more nuanced.
But she used LinkedIn for that. I read that whole post too. It was extremely thoughtful. Yeah. But like the stuff that takes off and like infects the brain on Twitter is like 180 characters, no room for nuance. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of like where we're at.
I think the interesting difference is 996 evolved in China because there was like 1 billion people there, and it evolved because of necessity. It wasn't like companies talked down where like 996 is happening. It was because competition was so intense. This just naturally drove people to work in this pattern. And so we're trying to take that and shift it to the US. And to your point, Helen, it's like it's not like a natural organic because there's so much competition, everyone's worried and everyone's putting in the extra hours. It is coming more top down, and maybe you can sustain the pressure that employees feel for a certain amount of time, but there's not a billion people in America. And so how long can you maintain that pressure in a more artificial way than exists in China? So I think it's like an interesting question to your point of like how long does this phase last for?
Well, good luck to my friends. Good luck to everyone job searching right now. And I'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Great Chat. Questions for us? Make sure to submit them at anothergreatchat.com. See you next week.